What's going on, everybody? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, and the Eagles have reached the biggest week of their season thus far. Commanders at Eagles, Thursday night football, the NFC East on the line. It's been a while since we've had an NFC matchup of this caliber in the NFC East that kind of decides the division, will play out who wins the crown at the end of the year at the halfway point. We've gotten it a few times recently with the Cowboys and Eagles, but this just feels different. It feels like whoever wins this game easily has that path to the NFC East and winning it there at the beginning of January. For the Eagles, I have 3 keys today to winning this game that they absolutely must enact if they want to beat a very, very good Commanders team. And it's been a while since we've played a Commanders team of this caliber, so it should be a great game, should be another great Thursday night matchup. We'll try to live up to the hype of Bengals Ravens and the shootouts that they've been putting on and give us some more quality Thursday night football. Before we get into it, thank you to everybody who's been following our lives both here on YouTube and on TikTok as well. We're always happy to answer your questions. We just started our own Discord channel, and obviously you can follow us on Twitter as well. So let's get into it. 3 keys for the Eagles this week. It's a short week. I think that actually benefits them, but here are the 3 keys no matter what. Number 1 is the utilization of Devonta Smith. It was another kind of weak for Devonta Smith, where he had 2 receptions for 14 yards. We're getting a lot of questions in fantasy. Oh, should I bench him? What should I do with him? Listen, every time in the A.J. Brown era that Devonta Smith has put out low production, they've course corrected the following week. Look back within this past month. Against the Giants, he had 1 reception for -2 yards. What happened the following 2 weeks? Each of those weeks, he had 80-plus receiving yards and a touchdown. This offense works the best when both he and A.J. Brown are getting quality targets, pushing the ball downfield to him, and they're going to need it against a top 10 offense and a top 10 EPA and a top 10 scoring offense in the Washington Commanders. Even when the Commanders struggled yesterday, they still put up 27 points, and you can consider that a weak outing from their offense. So you're going to need Devonta Smith. I kind of, compare this to the Packers game at the beginning of the year, where it was kind of a shootout back and forth. That was a quality offense in the Packers. It was early in the season then, so there was kind of, the people were getting their footing, both figuratively and literally, on that Brazil grass. And Devonta Smith had 7 receptions, but that didn't stop A.J. Brown from having the long touchdown. He had 100-plus yards receiving. They operate best when they're both thriving. Now, again, yesterday, 2 receptions for 14 yards. It was a down game for him, but it's kind of similar to that Giants performance I just referenced when he only had that 1 catch. The starters really only played 3 quarters, and they didn't really need Devonta Smith's talent and services. Like, they were able to move the ball. There were a ton of turnovers by the Dallas Cowboys that set the Eagles up well. It was clear that they were trying to establish the run on them. Jalen Hurts was able to use his legs. They got the tight ends involved. There were a lot of factors that kind of led to a lack of targets for Devonta Smith. And even A.J. Brown, who was over 100 yards receiving, he didn't have a huge target day. I think he only really had 4 receptions total, 3 receptions total. They were long receptions, and they definitely had some air yards to him, and he had yards after the catch. But really, it was more so just that's what the game plan indicated. And there was pressure the first quarter. For the Eagles, they did not handle pressure well. A lot of the routes were elongated, which I don't like to see. I would like to get the ball to Jalen Hurts' hands quickly. That's where Devonta Smith can come into play. Somebody who's surefire, sure-handed, and then you take your shots. I think it's the inverse of what you want to do. It seems like in the first half, they're trying to take, these home run shots. There were a few times it was frustrating yesterday where you see the ball, you'll see Hurts flush from the pocket, and he kind of throws the ball away, and there's not a receiver in the screen, which means they're all further than 10 yards down the field. I understand when you take those home run shots. I think this week you do the opposite. Everything goes short, and then you take it long. It feels like yesterday they tried to go long, so that the safeties weren't coming down into the box on Saquon, and then you can set up your deep threats to Devonta and A.J. Brown. This week, just get the ball to both of those guys early and often, but specifically Devonta Smith, and I expect a huge week from him. This game kind of reminds me of the 2021 Chargers game. I think he had 9 receptions, over 100 yards. There are a bunch of different ways to get creative with it. For the Commanders, to further this point, I'm operating under the assumption that Marshawn Lattimore will play. He's been dealing with a hamstring, but I do believe you'll see him out there, and it's his secondary that has been maligned all season. That's why they traded for him in the first place. They struggled on Sunday against the Steelers. They look mismatched against larger wide receivers who are kind of tough and can make tough catches, like George Pickens, like Mike Williams at the end of that game. I know Devonta Smith is smaller, but he definitely can make tough contested catches in traffic. And need I say it on A.J. Brown, he might be the best tough catcher, most sure-handed physical receiver in the league. But the biggest thing for this offense, get Devonta Smith involved. And I think you'll see it every time he has a slow game, they course correct on him. So that's number one. Number two, the defensive ends and their ability to contain Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels had just 5 yards rushing against the Steelers. That's way lower than what we'd expect from him. He has been great using his legs both to set up passes and run forward himself. That honestly was part of the reason why we struggled with him as a prospect, because we thought we might get himself hurt, and he did get himself hurt against the Panthers. But for the most part, that's been a huge thing of success. Here's why I think the Eagles can actually, negate that the way that the Steelers did. They have really athletic, really fast defensive ends that some other teams don't feature. Part of the reason for this renaissance of Eagles defense in this past month or so has been the play of the defensive ends and how they're utilizing guys and how guys are finding their role. I look specifically in this game at Nolan Smith, who at least once a week is making a play with his speed and athleticism that questions how he's a defensive end and not a wide receiver with the speed. So that, for instance, yesterday, the example was there was a throw to the running back in the flat from the defensive end position. Nolan Smith makes it to the flat, tackles the running back, and helps in a gang tackle of the running back. The week before, the pocket collapsed from the defensive interior guys on Trevor Lawrence. He bounces it outside. Nolan Smith beats him to the sideline and forces the throwaway. At least once a week, he is making a play with his speed and athleticism that is jaw-dropping. I hope that continues, because it almost has to against Jayden Daniels, who is the most athletic quarterback that they're going to see so far this season, the biggest dual threat that they have seen this season, the most likely quarterback to use his legs this season. All of these things, this is where Nolan Smith's skill set comes to play. When he was drafted, this is where you thought his skill set could come to play. It was said from the start, this guy's a bit undersized. We don't know if he could win with technique and with bull rushes, but boy, does this guy have some speed. And it's been on display in this past month as his snaps have increased. You love his energy. You love his speed. You're going to need it against Jayden Daniels. The other guy, and this one, you might not expect. The two linebackers you expect, Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean, they're definitely going to have their hands full, and they've been great. Zach Bond has probably been, and not even probably, he has been, according to the PFF grades, the best linebacker in football over the past 3 weeks. They are going to blitz those guys. Those guys have been great at tackling in space, which you'll obviously need in this game as well. But this guy, probably the last name you expect me to say, Bryce Huff, could have a big game on Thursday night. Here's my explanation for this, because I don't think a lot of people are going to agree with me on that one. It seems like they found the role for Bryce Huff, and it makes a lot of sense. His snaps have gone down dramatically. The ability to stop the run has increased dramatically. It doesn't take a physicist, a scientist, an astrophysicist, a psychologist, any of the ists to figure out what's going on here. It was told from us from Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator himself in training camp. He's just not of the size where he can be a 3-down guy who can stop the run. So they've pulled him on first and second downs. He's just not part of the rotation on early downs. But if they stop the run like they have, and it gets to 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 12, and it's an obvious passing down situation, well, they're bringing Bryce Huff in, and he's able to get after the quarterback with his speed. You saw it yesterday, a bull rush. He blows right by the tackle, and it's a strip sack. He was the highest graded defensive end yesterday. They have seemed to finally crack the code on Bryce Huff at the defensive end position here, and I think it could pay dividends. It's a different conversation to have on Huff if he's worth the amount of money to be a one-trick pony who can only play on passing downs. I will say that, but it does seem like everybody on this defensive line has settled into their roles. If you want to extend that out to the front seven with Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond, it surely feels like they have settled into their roles. The defensive interior has been shining, led by Jalen Carter, who continues to look like the heir apparent to Fletcher Cox, but a lot of other guys have been playing well in that front. And then the Jalix Hunt comes in yesterday. So you're getting even more and more production from those young guys. So all in all, the defensive front has been really good, but this is going to be the biggest test. And this is where you need that athleticism from guys like Nolan Smith, Bryce Huff, and even Jalix Hunt. So that's the biggest two. All right, so those were the two takeaways, and those were two really big ones. Now we're going to get into our last one. Before we do, thank you again to everyone who subscribed. We're closing in on 1,000. If we could get there by this Thursday night, that would be phenomenal. We'll probably do a giveaway if we get to that 1,000 at some point during the stream for the Thursday night football game. And then everybody, we've been streaming live on TikTok as well after the games. That's where we usually talk our fantasy and everything like that. So we just appreciate the support, and it should be a huge game for the Eagles on Thursday. Now let's get to the last one. If you've already followed this page, this is going to sound repetitive. And I'm sorry, but it just has to be said each and every week. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. It doesn't matter how talented the opponent is. It doesn't matter who's coaching the opposing team. It doesn't matter where the game is played. It doesn't matter if it's a short week. The third key to the Eagles winning the game and winning every game is coaching decision-making. For a few weeks, Nick Sirianni and the decision-making was taking points off the board for this team, most notably against the Jacksonville Jaguars when they're up 22-0, against a good team like the Commanders, and against a team who can put up points and the Commanders. You cannot take points off the board being overly aggressive in situations that do not call for it. So again, I mentioned this last week going into the Cowboys game and how take the points when they're necessary. Don't try to be overly aggressive. All the examples that were apparent in that Jaguars game, don't do it. So for instance, what happened in that Jaguars game? They were up 14-0, or they were up 10-0. They score the touchdown. They kick the extra point. They're up 17-0, and there's a flag on the extra point. It's on the Jaguars, okay? So you get the ball at the 1. You can go for 2 to make it 18-0, or you could decline it and keep it 17-0. Why create risks? Why? You don't need to. You don't need to go for it right there. Guess what happens? You make that 2-point conversion and you're up 18-0. Okay, it's a 3-possession game. If you decline and you kick the extra point and keep it, it's a 3-possession game. You're creating risk when there doesn't need to be. You don't have to be risk adverse. You can be aggressive, but that's not being aggressive. That's just being dumb. And you don't get it in that situation. And then 16-0, and it's a 2-possession game. So what was that extra point really worth? It was just overly aggressive for no reason. Those are the things that make such a difference when you're playing good teams, when you're playing, playoff level football, which we expect this game to be against the Commanders. That's just one of the many options. It's the late game situations like we saw against the Falcons earlier in the year. They throw it on third down. Saquon drops and it's like, okay, so you want to be super aggressive right there, but then you kick the field goal. Then you don't go for it and try to put the game away. If you want to go balls to the wall, aggressive, go for it. But this picking and choosing and being overly aggressive too often, that takes points off the board. And then, not fully committing to it, that kills you in games like this. And, that Falcons team is pretty good, and the Eagles were better than them all day, and the coaching decision-making just took the points off the board. Against the Jaguars, they wanted to go for it, and then all of a sudden, when you wanted to kick it, it was a 58-yard field goal. Those decision-making processes don't make sense. If I could offer advice to Nick Sirianni, and I know you don't care about it, I'm a guy hosting a podcast from his living room, but I think you could go by this, and a lot of people would agree. Bar room rules. If everybody in the bar said, yeah, they should probably go for it right here, you would. If everyone's like, it's probably a bad idea to go for it, probably don't do it. It's just the common sense bar room rules approach that I always subscribe to. And I think if Nick Sirianni did, he'd be in a really good space. And I think they need it in games like this. Don't take points off the board for yourself against good teams, especially, and this leads into why I'm confident in the Eagles on Thursday. They are the team that has to be overly aggressive. They're the team who's a little banged up on offense that's going on the road on a short week in a rival's stadium. They're the ones with Dan Quinn who probably have to be balls to the wall aggressive, not you, and make them do that. And you do that by playing smart, fundamental, well executed football, and they will. So those are my 3 reasons. Like I said, I'm pretty confident in the Eagles this week. I think the style of football that they play actually benefits playing on short weeks. They're getting healthier. They might have Jordan Mailata back. His practice window was open today. For the Commanders, they played without their tackle on Sunday. They played without Brian Robinson on Sunday, their running back. And then we don't know about Marshawn Lattimore as well. So it feels like with the short week, that's a tough flip to get those guys back. And then with the Eagles on offense, when the way that they want to run the football and they have those long sustained drives that we've talked about many times, that starts to really lean on defenses in second halves. You saw yesterday against the Cowboys, once those turnovers started piling up, it turned into a lot of hands on hips, a lot of heavy breathing. And that's what you could kind of expect if you're able to get to put together some first downs against the Commanders on Thursday night. Should be a great game. I'm really excited for it. This is obviously the biggest game of the season for this team. It would give us this point, if the Eagles win this, really, like, you have a 2.5 game lead in the division. This could be huge for them. And there's some games coming up that are kind of going to be tough for you. You're going on the road for the Rams. You have the Ravens as well. You got the Steelers in a few weeks. So you got through the part of the schedule we wanted to see you perform and put together this win streak. They have passed with flying colors. And now you're getting into the tougher gauntlet part of the schedule. Not quite like last year, but still a pretty tough part of it. And you want to see how they respond. Well, this is an absolute springboard. If they can win this divisional game, they'd be 3-0 in the division. You know, the Cowboys and Giants are faltering, so you could easily see yourself get to at least 5-1, owning some tiebreakers there. And just like I said, it almost gives you a 2.5 game lead if you can pull this one off on Thursday night. And I'm pretty confident in the boys on Thursday. And for the rest of the NFL community, hopefully we can just deliver some good football for you for 3 straight weeks on Thursday Night Football. We haven't been used to it, so let's get back to it. Again, I appreciate everybody who's tuned in over the past few weeks, whether it's previews, lives, caps like this, keys to the game, whatever it may be. We really appreciate the support, and we will see you all Thursday night, Commanders at Eagles in prime time. We'll talk to you then.